Welcome back to the show where we run you through all the Dolphins news you need to know about. After running through the news you need to know about, we answer fans' questions in the fan Q&A. Also have an interesting video that's going to be coming out this week. I'm going to talk a little bit about that after we get through the news you need to know about. And overall, ladies and gentlemen, it's been a pretty good year so far for Dolphins fans. Other than that, has been the greatest year for everybody, but obviously for Dolphins fans, you got to feel pretty good about yourself going into the season. The draft is only a few days away. It's getting closer and closer, and I'm just really pumped. I'm really excited about this offseason, and this team has... the sky is the limit, really, for this team and what it can do and how much improvement it can make by any means. So, saying all that, let's get into the news you need to know about. This first news story comes from Pro Football Rumors. Dolphins and Bengals are interested in wide receiver Cam Phillips. Following a standout showing in the XFL, Cam Phillips is drawing some interest from the NFL. Aaron Wilson of the Houston Chronicle reports that both the Dolphins and Bengals have expressed interest in the wideout. The 24-year-old led the XFL in receiving yards with 455, and he also hauled in 31 receptions and 9 touchdowns in only 5 games. Thanks to his consistent performance with the Houston Roughnecks, the 6', 202-pound wideout won a handful of Player of the Week awards. If you're not familiar with that particular team in the XFL, they had the best quarterback as well in P.J. Walker, who obviously signed with the Carolina Panthers. Cam Phillips obviously was his number one receiver on that team, number one target on that team, and he played very well. He's more of like an all-around receiver. He's a bigger, he's 6 feet, 200 pounds, so he's a bigger dude. Will that translate to the NFL? It really didn't work out with the Bills for whatever reason. Maybe it was just he needed more time to develop. Who really knows? It's interesting. The Dolphins, we have a really deep receiver core already. We just really need to find out who's going to play that slot position. And can Cam Phillips fill that role? I would have to watch more of him to see if he could become a really good slot receiver or if he's more of an outside threat. I would have to watch a little bit more of him. But that is one hole. It's not even a hole. It's just like, who's going to play there? Alan Hearns can do it. Albert Wilson can do it. Jakeem Grant, I don't think... he has the body build and the quickness and speed to be able to do it, but he's never been able to do it, so I don't know if you want to leave him out. So, where Isaiah Ford, who to me should be who has probably the best shot of doing it and played the best out of any of them, did in down the stretch of last year. So they have a lot of really good depth and versatility at that position. They just need to figure out who's gonna be the mainstay inside, and we just got to figure that. If we figure that out, the receiver core is still a lot of talent on it, but I feel like that particular spot needs to be settled on because the slot receiver position is a very important position. I know you can say that about every position on the field, but it's like a tight end. If you have a really good tight end on your team who can work the middle of the field, you don't really have to have an outstanding slot receiver. And we have that in Mike Gesicki. So, plus we have all of these different body types that could play there that can bring different skill sets to the role. Like if you think about Albert Wilson, he brings speed and athleticism and a physicality and great run after the catch. Isaiah Ford is a great route runner with great hands. He brings that to the slot position. He's a very quick in and out of his breaks, and he's a bigger physical guy. Alan Hearns is just your all-around good possession receiver. So they all bring different things to that position. But again, like I said, I don't think it's going to be too... it's just somewhere we got to settle down on. So maybe Cam Phillips could come in and help compete for that role. But if you think about the outside, there's no room for him. When are you going to take Preston Williams or Devontae Parker off the field? Unless you're running the football, like on a short yardage situation. Like, you're never going to take those two off the field, especially if Preston comes back healthy. Like, you're never taking those two on the field. Preston Williams, like I said a million times, but if you go back and watch his season, even in the preseason, and his regular season, his ability to run routes is his most underrated part of his game. His ability, how smooth he is getting in and out of his breaks for someone his size. I think he's 6'5" or 6'4", something crazy like that, 6'3", 6'4", somewhere in there. He's a big dude who can run every route in the route tree, and he's just so smooth doing it. super underrated. And I'm very excited to see him play this upcoming season. And then obviously we don't have to talk about Devontae Parker, who had a breakout season and the most yards in the AFC by a receiver. So I think the position that this team not desperately needs, but if there's a hole at the receiver core, is really just finding a consistent body at the slot receiver position. And we'll see who can win it, because there's a lot of capable guys that can do it. But if you're wanting to add to that competition, then you could go out and get someone like that. So we'll see. I mean, we'll see what happens with that. But again, I don't know if Cam Phillips necessarily fits the roster that much. Maybe you want to add depth to the outside receiver position. Because, Devontae Parker and Preston Williams, he's had the 1 year that he's been injured. DP's had, his injury history isn't great either. So maybe you just want to add some depth there. I could see that. The sexy story comes from Pro Football Rumors, and this is relating to Emmanuel Ogbah and Jordan Howard's health. The Dolphins received good news on the health statuses of the two of their free agent additions. Emmanuel Ogbah said he has been cleared for football work for around a month, but has yet to partake in workouts because of COVID-19. Jordan Howard also will be full go when the Dolphins renew, obviously, off-season work, or when they start off-season program, whenever they do. After a strong start to the Eagles season, Howard suffered a shoulder injury that derailed his momentum. He played in just one game after Week 9, but did not log any carries. But he's healthy. He's 100% healthy. He said he's 100% healthy in the interview that he did. So that's really good news. I know a lot of you guys were concerned about the health of some of the guys that we signed, and those are two of the biggest, two of the guys that people are concerned about. Seems like they're healthy. Jordan Howard hasn't had the injury bug before Philadelphia, so that could be, hopefully it's a one-time thing. And then Emmanuel Ogbah, as far as I know, hasn't been injured, in his days in Cleveland. So, we should be pretty good sorry, we're stuttering, in that department. And really, that's all the news you need to know about. It's a really slow news day. Not a lot going on. We have a couple news stories left here, but not too much. This comes from NFL.com. Byron Jones thinks the Dolphins quarterbacks could have, quote, no weak links. That's not exactly what he said. They're kind of twisting his words on that. He just said we could have no weak links. But this is what he did say about the potential ability of the secondary. He says, this is from Byron Jones in his introductory press conference that he did. This is what he said. He said, quote, we can create matchups that are difficult for receivers and quarterbacks. He didn't say, he said we can build a team that there are no weaknesses. He didn't say that we have no weaknesses on the secondary. He did not say that. But he did say it does create a lot of issues for the opposing team, and it does. And, I wanted to talk about this a little bit because I was thinking about this a lot. Because I do remember, I did say this, that the Dolphins still have a need at free safety. They do. I still don't think Bobby McCain, I don't think he's a good fit there. But he's a good player. But, I'm assuming the Dolphins are going to move Nick Needham into the slot. If you don't remember, Nick Needham had a pretty dang good year for an undrafted free agent who's starting at the cornerback position, and all he did was get better. I mean, in preseason, from where he started in preseason to where he ended in the regular season, is one of the biggest growths I've ever seen of any player ever. He was not good in the preseason, and then he just, after that Colts game, he proved to be a pretty good corner, like a solid corner. Him moving in the slot, he led the league. He led all rookies, in pass deflections. So he's on the come up. People forget about Nick Needham. And one of the things that I'm underrating here, and I didn't even think about until I was done making the podcast, is Eric Rowe, who, when he was moved to safety, literally didn't allow any yards to tight ends. The man was locking up. I think one of his, just to bring this matchup up because it's one of the better ones, against Pro Bowler Eric Ebron, who didn't have the greatest year in the world, but still, this is a Dolphins team that over the last 5 to 6 years has struggled against tight ends on a consistent basis, like terribly struggled. That's why Kiko Alonso was run out of town, at least with fans, because he just couldn't cover on a consistent basis. Eric Rowe did such a good job on tight ends and running backs. it's unbelievable, actually, how good he is at strong safety, or was for us at strong safety. It's actually crazy. How bad he played at corner, and then him going to safety and playing as well as he did is amazing. So really, when you look at the secondary, you look at who's starting on the outside, don't even have to talk about it because it is so special when you have those two on the outside. And again, just to bring up, some of Byron Jones' biggest accomplishments, held the Offensive Player of the Year, who catches everything, to 0 receptions against the Saints. Okay? Do you understand that? Okay, so as long as, just put that in perspective. This Michael Thomas catching 100 balls a year in Sean Payton's offense. And I think he might have actually caught one pass, but he had like 4, if he did, he didn't have over like 10 yards. It was something insane like that. So that's how good Byron Jones is. And then you match him up with the interception leader before he got hurt, and Xavier Howard, and how special X is. Like, the one game that X was relatively healthy against the Steelers, when we put him on Juju Smith-Schuster, if you watch that Steelers game, Juju Smith-Schuster was quiet. I mean, he literally picked a ball off before he got hurt and had to leave the game. And it was like night and day. Like, when X was out there, he couldn't move. Like, the dude couldn't get open, and then obviously after that he was catching go routes on us in traffic. So if you team up X with Byron, you have Nick Needham in the slot, you have Eric Rowe at strong safety, who can match up with your team's best tight end or running back coming out of the backfield, depending on what kind of weapon you have on your team. Literally, and you have obviously up and coming Nick Needham in the slot, like. And if you want to, you can take Bobby McCain for free safety if you replace him and put him in the slot where he's played his best football. So when you look at the secondary of this team, the matchup issues that it can present to is crazy. And it's really cool that we were able to get Nick Needham that development. He would not have had that on any other team. And for him to get better and better, maybe he never would have gotten that opportunity to get better on any other franchise, and he did. He just kept getting better. And he was one of our better rookies of that year. And he might have been, hopefully I'm not, other than Preston Williams, if I had to rank the rookies, it would probably go Preston, unless I'm forgetting about someone, and I sometimes do when I start talking on the podcast. But Preston was probably 1. 2, I would say, is Nick Needham. And 3, I would say, is Christian Wilkins. Christian Wilkins played way better at the end of the year than he did at the beginning of the year. He got better too. But Nick Needham, his responsibilities, like, we took Christian Wilkins off the field sometimes on third down. Nick Needham was out there all the time. And what he was able to do, and what he was asked to do as an undrafted player, is very special. So, again, when you look at the secondary, and what Byron Jones is saying is we present a lot of bad matchups for other offenses. They do. Like, they really do. And in this scheme where we play, man, and all of the players in this defense fit that scheme to a T, this defense is, and especially the secondary, is going to be very special. Like, I don't think people, and even I didn't even think about that until I was done with the pod. I was like, dude, man, when you look at some of the, like, just because of the addition of Byron Jones, where other people can just move to now, and really what the flexibility that this team, dude, if this team takes a free safety, because I know a lot of people have us taking the Alabama, what's his name, McKinney. Hopefully I'm not forgetting his name. Who's a really good player, and the best safety in the draft. If we take him and plug him in at free safety, or we sign a Demarius Randall, for instance, like, the secondary has no weaknesses. Like, they're all good players. 2 of them are Pro Bowlers, all pro type caliber talents. Everybody else is really good at their job and what they're supposed to do in this defense. So yeah, Byron Jones is right. This defense, I think people aren't talking about how, even Dolphins fans, I haven't really seen sit down and break down how well the secondary could be with the movement that it has with this, with the addition of Byron Jones. And then you couple that with the improvements that they made in the front 7 and the linebackers that they already had on the team. The defense can be very good, and especially the secondary unit. So I'm very excited about that, and I'm really excited about it. So yeah, it's going to be pretty rad. It's going to be pretty awesome. I think this is the last news story of the day, and then we're going to move on. Not a ton to talk about. Let's see here. Make sure this is the last one, because sometimes I forget and there's something else that we should talk about. Yeah, this is the last news story of the day. So the reason I waited to do this podcast is because if you're not familiar with what's going on, Bleacher Report is doing a tournament where they have accumulated the best rosters for each NFL franchise and are going to sim it in Madden. And it's a basically like the NCAA tournament. If you lose, you're knocked out. And the Dolphins played today. If you're not familiar with this at 9 o'clock, and the game's about an hour long. It's like 6-minute quarters. And so first of all, I'll tell you the result of the game in case you didn't watch it. The result is the Dolphins got blown out 3-24. And if you're not familiar with Madden, I'm not going to sit here and talk about it for a long time, but it really, depending on what playbook you get, is how the simulation will call the plays. And the Dolphins' offensive playbook doesn't really mesh well with what Dan Marino's skill set is. And basically, for the entire first half, Dan didn't pass the football. We kept handing it off to Ricky Williams, and Dan Marino didn't get a chance to win the game for us. So, and the reason we lost is Gronk, I think, caught 2 touchdowns. He had like over 100 yards. We could not guard Robin Gronkowski. So yeah, the final score of the game was 24-3. Dan Marino never got a shot. If they would have customized the playbooks to what the skill set of the team's best player was on offense, they should have given us like the spread playbook or run and gun or something like that, where Dan can just pass for 60 attempts or something crazy like that. He can hand it off to Ricky Williams here and there, but we're talking about prime Dan Marino right now with all those weapons on his team. He should have been able to take over the game. So if you didn't watch the game, that's what happened. Unfortunately, we got knocked out in the first round. We did play the Patriots in the first round, who have obviously a pretty good roster, but still, it was very annoying watching that, because I want to watch Dan Marino sling the rock with some of the best receivers we've had to offer over this franchise's years. The second gripe I have with this, and this is the last thing we're going to talk about, is not only did the playbook suck and didn't match Dan Marino's skill set, but the rosters were bad. Okay, they didn't give us Nick Bonacani. Now, if you're not familiar with this player, he had 32 interceptions in his career. He did play for the Patriots, and they gave him to the Patriots. Now, he played 7 years with the Dolphins. He also played 7 years with the Patriots. Okay, he went to 3 straight Super Bowls with the Dolphins, won 2 of them, 3 years in a row, and they gave him to the Patriots, where they didn't win anything. He played the exact same amount of seasons as he did with the Patriots. What should be the tiebreaker who gets him? The fact that we went to 3 Super Bowls and we won 2 of them. It should have been Zach Thomas and Nick next to each other. And instead, we got Zach Thomas, and I'm not even joking, Raekwon McMillan, who for some reason was on the field 70 to 60% of the time. And it was disgusting to watch. So I have a gripe with that. Nick should have been on the team. AJ Dewey can be a backup, and you just put Nick in, because I think he was the other starting linebacker on the team. It should have just been Nick and Zach with AJ on the team, depending on what front you're running. Those are the guys who should have been out there. And this is another guy in terms of, there's one more roster gripe I have. Paul Warfield, they gave to the Cleveland Browns. Now, Paul Warfield is the best receiver. Now, people forget, this is a time in the 70s and 60s when no one passed the football. And this is Paul Warfield's, and especially us in the 70s. We were handing the ball off to Zonka, Kick, and Morris. But this is Paul Warfield's stats, in case you don't know. He finished with his career over 400 catches, almost 9,000 receiving yards. He averaged 20 yards a catch. And he finished with 85 total touchdowns. That's more than Gronkowski had. Okay, just as an example of how dominant he was. He was a deep threat, to give you an idea of how he played the game. He played 6 years for the Dolphins. I think he played 7 years with the Cleveland Browns. You know what the tiebreaker is? I'm sure you guys can guess. We went to 3 Super Bowls with him and won 2 of them with him. Why was he not a Dolphin? It makes no sense. Like, it doesn't make any sense. It makes me very upset that we didn't get Paul Warfield or Nick on the team. But they did put Jake Scott on the team, which I thought was cool, because I was like, at least they know that Jake Scott was a good player. So in case you're wondering, our starting safeties were Jake Scott and Rashad Jones. So, yeah, I just felt, and I don't know why Raekwon McMillan was on the field as much as he was. They should have taken him off the roster. They should have filled the rosters out more. They didn't. There were still some, 2019 Dolphins that were on that team that shouldn't have been on the team. But, yeah, it was really unfortunate to watch the all-time Dolphins team in a simulation, and Dan Marino didn't pass the ball 3 times and a half. It was very upsetting. So, take whatever the heck that was with you. You know what I mean? It takes me off as a Dolphin. Sitting here and watching this team, it's like, God, it should have been better than it was, and it just kind of takes me off. So moving on from that. They literally treated Dan Marino like it was Scott Mitchell, or it was bad, guys. It was where he was like Chad. It was terrible. It was terrible, like Chad Pennington when he blew his shoulder out and we were running the Wildcat. It was awful. It was awful. So moving on from that, before we get into the fan Q&A where we answer fans' questions, I do want to say in honor of the fact that we got pretty much just hit over the head by this tournament, and we should have been treated a little bit better, in my opinion. Lost two of the best players, 2 of the top 15 Dolphins of all time, to other franchises that they didn't deserve to be on. But nonetheless, somehow the Patriots got him. It doesn't matter. The point is, I want to do this for the channel, and we're going to be doing the all-time Dolphins team. But if you're not familiar with the format, it's going to be like, if you've ever watched The Ringer or Bill Simmons, he does this thing where he ranks and puts together a team, but it's like a bottle of wine, where he calls it his all-time wine team, where he picks a specific year. And that's how it's not like, oh, Dan Marino, but no, it's 1990 whatever year, and you already know what year it's going to be for Dan Marino, or year for Jason Taylor, or what specific year for Zach Thomas. So it's not really like, oh, these are the greatest, but these are the greatest single season Dolphins years. So if you're not familiar with that format, that's what we're going to be doing. It's going to be an entire, probably hour-long show. If it has to go longer than that, we'll put up another part to it. But we're going to be putting that team together, and I'm going to be making the all-time Dolphins wine bottle team, I guess, is the format and what it's going to be called. It should be a lot of fun, especially since I had to sit through this Bleacher Report bullcrap. So it should be fun, and I'm very excited to do the list. If you guys want to do some of your lists in the comment section below, it'd be cool to see some of your guys' lists. So let's go through the fan Q&A where we answer fans' questions. This first question comes from SM. SM says, I see the quarterback from Georgia, Jake Fromm, is going to the Patriots in the second round. What are your thoughts? Oh, no. Before we get into the fan Q&A, I did have one more thing to bring up. And we'll answer SM's question here in a second. I had one more thing to bring up. I had, if you haven't watched Pro Football Focus's free agency recap, or whatever the heck it was, for each division they did it, and they did it for the AFC East. And whatever your opinions are on the moves that we made, and I'm sure like 80 to 99% of the people that are talking about this have never seen this roster play, which I don't blame people for that. I mean, if I wasn't a Dolphins fan, I wouldn't be tuning on our 2019 games. But and I'm sure, like I said, I'm sure nobody has seen that. But this team is going to be getting a lot of weird comparisons and analysis about it that doesn't even make sense. And I thought, and again, if you don't like the signings, that's fine. And that's not what I'm talking about right now. But one of the things that they said that bothered me that I wanted to talk about on the podcast is they compared Brian Flores to Matt Patricia. And that's insane. I want to say that right now. First of all, they're completely different. They're completely different player or coaches. One made a team and a franchise and a roster better. The other one put it in the dirt. Okay, so let me explain why they're completely different. Number one, when Brian Flores came to the Dolphins, he assembled a really good coaching staff. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, he came to a team that was already in the toilet and struggling, and the organization was struggling and desperately needed leadership. And that's something that he provided, and he changed the culture by the time the season ended. That's something that he did. He came to a team that was already struggling and wasn't winning, and the organization was in shambles from Mike Tannenbaum, Adam Gase. There was no leadership. The roster was being handled poorly. It was an absolute disaster. And Stephen Ross needed someone to come in there and be a head coach and take hold of the reins and really turn around the organization. And he really, from all of those aspects of the organization, it's been much, much better than it was before with Adam Gase. If you look at what Matt Patricia did in Detroit, he took over a team that was 9-7 and just really needed someone to, what the Lions thought, they needed someone to come in and push them over the edge, push them a little bit higher to 11-5 or 10-6 or 12 games maybe. Improve the roster and really send the Lions in over the hump and get them really going with Matthew Stafford. So what did he do? Nothing. He's made them worse since he got there. So and he's been there for what? Is this 3 years or 2 years? I can't remember. I think he's going into his 4th year at Detroit. To compare those two coaches to each other is insane. Okay, first of all, Flo has only been here 1 year. In the 1 year that he was here, he did amazing. His biggest accomplishment in Miami was beating New England, and that's in Gillette, which is something we haven't done in 10 years. Over 10 years up until that point. Okay? And he made a bad team better, and he made a bad organization run the way an organization should be ran. Again, like I said, Matt Patricia took over Jim Caldwell's job, and all Jim Caldwell did in his best years there in Detroit was go to the playoffs twice. 1 year that they went 11-5. The last year that he got fired, they went 9-7. So it's actually upsetting that comparison was even made, because it's not fair to Brian Flores. It doesn't make any sense, and the two are very different people, very different coaches. One took over a mess of an organization. The other one took over a franchise that had a franchise quarterback and completely ran it into the ground. Okay, so I don't understand how that's a comparison. You can say what you want about the free agent signings, but to compare Brian Flores to Matt Patricia is insane. First of all, like I said, everything that I said, I'm not going to repeat myself. I was about to repeat myself. But for those reasons, they're very different. And we could talk about that a lot more and how, here's the one thing I will bring up before we move on to the fan Q&A. What Matt Patricia did to Matthew Stafford is criminal. Matthew Stafford, and I know a lot of people, they wanted to get him a running game. They wanted to, take some of the pressure off of his shoulders and stuff like that. Well, the most successful that he has been and that team has been is when he's been able to spread the ball out and air the football out. We're in 2020, which is a crazy number to say. But we're in 2020. This is modern day football. The Chiefs, their number one thing that they do is pass the football. So the running game is second to that offense. You can win a Super Bowl now being that way, being that football team. And to take Matthew Stafford and really take his best attribute away, and instead of building around that and improving that, adding more talent to that, to completely change the style of play that he's been most successful with, I think was one of the biggest bad decisions that they made. And again, instead of building, this is what Bill Belichick does, and this is something Matt Patricia isn't doing. Instead of building around of what you have and making, really being flexible and being New England Patriots is what they do, is they build a scheme around of what they have. Matt Patricia didn't do that. Brian Flores did do that. He did everything possible to help give us the best chance to win with what we had. And that's why we won as many games as we did, is because he looked at our roster and he put a game plan together of what is the best way we can win with this team. And that's something Matt Patricia has never done in Detroit. And that is something Brian Flores did his first year here. So that's another big difference between the two. If I'll give you an example of that, we could not run the football. And when Ryan Fitzpatrick took over the job, Brian realized that, and all we did was pass the football. And we won more games because of it. Not to mention on defense, where we ran a way more zone at the halfway point of the season. And that's just a great example of Brian adjusting to his players and giving us the best chance to win. So that's all I have to say about the comparisons to Matt Patricia and Brian Flores. I think it's a crazy comparison. I think it's an unfair comparison, and I don't think it should ever be a comparable thing. So let's move on to the fan Q&A and get back to SM's question. This first question comes from SM. SM says, I see the quarterback from Georgia, Jake Fromm, going... Again, this is the fan Q&A. We answer fan questions. And this is what SM said. He says, I see the quarterback from Georgia, Jake Fromm, going to the Patriots in the second round. Thoughts? Not a big fan of Jake Fromm. So, yeah, I don't really care that he goes to the Patriots. Listen, here's what I will say about New England and this whole idea that, first of all, do people forget that they had Tom Brady for 20 years? Because it really feels that way. And people bring up the Matt Castle year when they won 11-5. Guess who won the division? That's right, fins up. But that is okay. They won 11-5 with Matt Castle. They didn't go to the playoffs. We won the division. Whoop-de-crap. And I don't care what their record is. First of all, I don't care. They won 11-5. Were they going to go anywhere in the playoffs? No. They weren't going to win the Super Bowl. Okay, so good for them. They went 11-5 and missed the play. Like, I don't... That is... People bring that up, and it's like, okay, but people go 11-5 all the time. The Jaguars went 10-6 and went to the AFC Championship game. Is anybody going to remember that team in 20 years? No. No, people don't remember the Jacksonville teams in the 90s that went to the AFC Championship game and lost, okay? With Mark Brunell, for God's sake. So, it doesn't matter at the end of the day. Now, if you win an AFC Championship and you're dominant, and that wasn't because of Matt Castle, it's because of Tom Brady, then that's a completely different thing. Like, you can have success like Andy Reid did without winning a Super Bowl and still being iconic and still being, like, do you remember all those years we won all of those NFC East championships, all of the game, NFC championships that we went to? That is something to hang your hat on, and that is something a fan base will remember forever. But one blip year where you won 11, it doesn't matter. So, I don't really know what I was saying. My point is that quarterbacks matter, and I think Dolphins fans know that more than anybody. Quarterbacks matter, and I don't care if you're Bill Belichick or Bill Walsh. You need a quarterback to have the amount of success that those two had in their career. Even Don Shula, who had 2 Hall of Fame quarterbacks in his career, 3 if you count his Colts years where he coached Johnny U. So you need a great quarterback. The only head coach that didn't have a consistent great quarterback was Joe Gibbs, and that's the reason he is, revered as like he is because he was able to do it without a consistent franchise quarterback. Which is he's the only one. Like, unless you count the Trent Dilfer or the Joe Flacco year where they were either Joe Flacco had a career year or it was just like one of the best defenses, if not the best defense of all time, won them that Super Bowl. So my point is you need a great quarterback, and those don't come. First of all, if it's Jake Fromm, then I'm wrong. But those don't come around every time. They just don't. But, it's very rare to find. When we know this, it's very rare to find a franchise quarterback. And if you think about the quarterbacks before Tom Brady in New England, the 2 notable ones are Drew Bledsoe and Jim Plunkett, and we know how Jim Plunkett's career went. And Drew Bledsoe, was nothing to write home about. He did go to a Super Bowl. He lost to the Green Bay Packers. He did beat us in the AFC Championship game, which is an absolute travesty. Or no, it wasn't. It wasn't that year. We lost in the AFC Championship game to a different New England team that went who lost to Chicago, if I'm not mistaken. I can't remember who the starting quarterback was that year, but he wore 11, I believe. I think it was the same draft as Dan Marino, too. But anyway, the point is that, they haven't had a franchise quarterback before Tom Brady, unless you count Drew Bledsoe. But it's hard to find. And New England was a team longer than the Dolphins were a team. So that gives you an idea of how hard it is to find one, and a generational one like Tom Brady. And, I just hearing these people talk about they had Tom Brady for 20 years. People just really think it's all Bill. And I can assure you that you need a great quarterback to have that amount of consistent success. Like I said, if you look at NFL history and all the great head coaches in the history of the league, they all had franchise quarterbacks. Chuck Noll had Terry Bradshaw. Bill Walsh had Joe Montana. Don Shula had Dan Marino and Bob Greasy. I can go on and on. Sean Payton had Drew Brees. Bill Belichick had Tom Brady. Tony Dungy had Peyton Manning. I mean, you could go on and on and on and on and on and on and on. So and those, I'm talking about all-time great head coaches that had sustained success over many years. They all had franchise quarterbacks. If you don't have a franchise quarterback, you can't do that. So there you go. John Madden had Ken Stabler. Like you could just go on and on with that. So let's. This next question comes from Will. Will says, "Do you think they'll cut Albert Wilson? I have a feeling we're gonna draft a wide receiver in the next 2 to 3 rounds, or two, and then in this round 2 or 3. This draft is stacked at receiver. Yeah, it is, and I wouldn't mind if I was gonna draft one. It would be someone who can stretch the field and brings." Like, we can run jet sweeps with them. They could take kicks and punts. Someone like Henry Ruggs or like a McCole Hardman. Someone who can add more to the offense with speed and special teams ability. That's someone I would look for if I was going to draft a receiver. This next question comes from Beef Kimchi. He says, Skaggs, I know the Dolphins are going to pick up a quarterback as their first overall pick. What other positions and players should the Dolphins get in the first round of the draft? I'm a huge fan of getting 2 tackles. If you have to use one of your second-round picks to get even a better tackle, maybe you move from, pick 18 to maybe pick 15 or 13 to acquire maybe a tackle that you think is going to go earlier than you can wait. I'm a huge fan of getting a quarterback and 2 tackles. And I think when you look at the team as a whole, we need tackles, and obviously we need a quarterback. We have a starting running back now. We can get another running back in round 2 because we have multiple second-round picks if we need it, which we do. So my dream scenario in the first round is getting 2 tackles and a quarterback. I know that sounds kind of boring, but I feel like that's the best move for the franchise. This next question comes from Beef. He says, I know it's way too early, but I'm super excited for the upcoming season. Do you see the Dolphins going to the Super Bowl this year? I see the Dolphins playing against Tampa Bay for the Super Bowl and winning. I'm just dreaming big right now. Yeah, it's a little too early for that. It's going to be a bloodbath for this division. I can tell you that right now, for the AFC East. It's going to be hard. It's going to be interesting to see how... We're going to have to win on the road, and we're going to have to win in the division to win the AFC East. But it's going to be a bloodbath. I can tell you that right now. Depending on what happens in the draft, is going to be how high my expectations are going to be, or maybe not even expectations, but really just what I guess expect from the team and how good they will be. They still have the line of scrimmage issue. They still need 2 tackles that they will get. So we'll see. It's still kind of a wait and see. After the draft, but they have an opportunity to make this team a contender with the draft that they have, and I'm very excited to see what they do. So yeah, the sky is really the limit for the team because they can win the division, and if you remember, there's an extra seed now. There's 7 seeds in each conference now, so it's even easier to get into the playoffs now. Not to mention the AFC East is wide open, and if you win the division, you're in. So I'm very excited. This next question comes from Jay Rose. He says, what do you think about us drafting Thaddeus Moss at tight end? I know we have Gesicki, but Moss can catch as well as block, and the rumor is we're going to draft a tight end. I'm not opposed to it. Depending on, if Thaddeus Moss is a 3rd-round pick, I'm not mad at it. I like that pick. He, 2 tight ends on the roster just gives us even more weapons to throw to with a young quarterback or a veteran one like Fitzy. And, I like Thaddeus Moss. He's a good player. Big dude, physical dude. Great hands, can block, like you said, and I would be excited about that. This next question comes from SM. He says, if we hold the 5th in the draft and Burrow and Tua are gone, do we take Herbert, the best player available, or try to trade down? This is a great question. Do you take Herbert or the best player available? You take the best player available, especially if you're at 5. Now, what does that mean at 5? Because, like I said, I would love to get 2 tackles. Do you take one at 5? No, I don't think you take one at 5 because this draft is deep with tackles. I think you either go, and I think you go best player available. If Okuda's there, you take Okuda. If Isaiah Simmons is there, and you take Isaiah Simmons. I think that's what you do. And maybe you trade up and get someone like Jordan Love, or you wait till next year to get a quarterback. Or you sign Cam Newton. If we didn't get a quarterback, listen. If Tua and Joe weren't there, I would sign Cam Newton. I know that sounds crazy to some people. I know there's a lot of haters out there for Cam Newton, but as a fail safe, I would do that. If we did get the top 2 quarterbacks in the draft, I would just sign Cam Newton. This next question comes from SM, or no, it doesn't. It comes from Beef. He says, "Hey Skaggs, now that the draft is 3 weeks away, do you see any team trying to move up past Miami in the draft, or even Miami going higher to get to Burrow?" I do see the Dolphins getting up to get a quarterback. I don't. It depends, dude. I still have this feeling that the Bengals are taking Herbert. So I don't know what's gonna happen, but I think the most likely scenario is the Dolphins trading out. This next question comes from Alonzo. He says, "What do you think of Raekwon Davis, nose tackle at Alabama? I think we can get Tua with 5, Josh Jones at left tackle at 18, and Raekwon Davis at nose tackle at 26. Listen, I think you can get Raekwon Davis in the second round because I don't think. First of all, I think you can get a good nose tackle in any round because their skill set's very limited. They're not on the field all 3 downs, depending on how good the nose tackle is. So I think you don't take one in the first round, in my opinion." This next question comes from the dude. He says, "Do you see us picking running back in round 1? Swift? Possibly. I would rather get a quarterback and 2 tackles, but if we got Swift or Taylor or Dobbins, I would be happy with it. I could definitely see it for sure." This next question comes from SM. He says, "If Ryan Fitzpatrick plays better this season, do we bring him back in 2021 or start whoever we drafted?" I think you're going to see the Dolphins go with the whoever they draft in year 2. I don't think Fitzy... I mean, now if Fitzy goes for 35 and 12, then I think you have to go with Fitzy in year 2, or the third year with Fitzy. But I don't know. Depending on where, I think Ryan Fitzpatrick's gonna have a good year, but it's really depending on what he wants. I think. Now, does he play after this year? I don't know. Remember, he's in his late 30s. We'll see what happens, but It could really go either way on that one because I really do feel like he's gonna have a good year. So to be honest with you, that could go either way, and I'm fine with either scenario. This next question comes from Ethan. He says, "Hey Skaggs, the latest NFL.com power rankings have us dropping from 24 to 26 after free agency. Do these people even watch football?" I think I brought up the example of when we went 10-6 and people didn't freak out like they are for the Bills. We did the same things the Bills did, literally. Now, we didn't lose in overtime in a playoff game, but we lost to the Killer Bees in their prime in a playoff game, but we still went 10-6 and made the playoffs. And, we weren't treated this way. And Ryan Tannehill has gone on to go to an AFC Championship game, so it's not like we had a bad starting quarterback at the time. So, yeah, it's really weird, the perception that team has when it was we played them hard in Buffalo, and we only got better. So, to really just gloss over us in that division, I think is crazy. And I don't really care what NFL.com. I don't care. I know what I see with my own eyes, and I know what this team has added, and what that means for the scheme and for the team itself. And I'm confident in that. So that's how I feel about it. I really don't care about what NFL.com says, and what do I think about it? What do I think about it? I don't really know what I think about. I don't really I don't have a feeling towards it. I think it's wrong, because I do think we contend for the title. This next question comes from Jay Rose. He says, "If Rosen fails again to beat out Fitzpatrick in preseason, do you think we will keep him as a glorified backup or move on?" He will be kept. He will be on the roster for the entire 2020 season. That's my prediction. Whatever happens, I don't think it's going to matter. I think the Dolphins might actually keep 3 quarterbacks until the next offseason where they can get rid of one of them for assets, if they choose to do that. And maybe you get an in-season trade, or maybe you get a training camp trade. That would be the other thing that could happen, but you're definitely going to see Josh Rosen in a Dolphins uniform by training camp, regardless of what happens in the draft. This question comes from SM. He says, "What is the plan for Dolphins if Tua goes number 1 overall? You get Joe Burrow. That's the plan." Will, this next question comes from Will. He says, "What I like most about the way this roster is being built is how the players can complement each other's skill set. skill sets. X can give Byron tips on ball hawking to get his INTs up, and Fitz is mentoring in the quarterback room. What are your thoughts on any of, or excuse me, he says, what are your thoughts on this or any other examples? My thoughts on it is, yeah, you're right. I mean, the way they complement each other, the way that they actually add more depth because of those additions, like Byron Jones, who really just moves people around, and it adds even more depth and more versatility. It is awesome. So yeah, I agree. Those players do complement each other. And some of those other examples, I would say Vince Beagle or Kyle Van Noy with all the veteran linebackers that come here. If you don't know, Atlanta Roberts was voted team captain on that Patriots defense. So that's the kind of leadership we're bringing into the building. So young people like Vince Beagle and Andrew Van Ginkel can really learn from them and how to be a great player. So I think that's a relationship that could really benefit those players and really bring them along even faster. This next question comes from Alonzo. He says, "What do you think who do you think the Dolphins like more, Tua or Burrow?" I think they like Burrow more. I think everybody likes Burrow more because you don't have to worry about the injury bug, and he's just as good as a player as Tua is healthy. So I think those are the reasons why. This next question comes from Tech Me Out. He says, "If Tua is snatched away before we can get him at 5, I see us trading up from 18 to 11 when the Jets." With the Jets and throw in Gase's favorite Albert Wilson and draft Jordan Love. In 2021, Love and Rosen battle it out. Thoughts? I mean, I would rather have Cam Newton than Jordan Love. That's just me. If you can't get the top two quarterbacks, I feel like just take Cam Newton. I know that he has had his injury history, but I have seen Cam Newton throughout his career. He's a great quarterback when he is healthy, just like any other player in the NFL. And he really his entire career never was on a good offense. He never had a lot of talent around him. His schemes were always very basic and terrible and very 1980 Walter Payton-esque, where it's 3 yards in a cloud of dust. There was no versatility and creativity in that offense. So he had to deal with a very bad offense for most of his career. He had people like Greg Olsen. He had Steve Smith for 2 years, but his number one receivers. I'm not talking about just receiving. I'm talking about receivers. You think were Ted Ginn and Kelvin Benjamin, and we saw how those careers. And Ted Ginn's had a nice career, but he's never been a number one receiver. And Kelvin Benjamin was just slow and fat. So he's never really had anything around him. So for him to come to Miami, and if we get some good tackles and we have all those weapons around him, the sky is the limit. So, it really, that's what I would do if the top two quarterbacks were gone. This next question comes from Jay Rose. And you get to spend all 3 of your picks. So, I think that's a way better, instead of not wasting, but settling for a quarterback that, to me, there's a huge drop-off from those two, when you can just have Cam Newton and spend your 3 first-round picks to make the team better. I think that's a better scenario than that. This next question comes from Jay Rose. He says, "Who do you believe wins our division now that Brady is a Buccaneer?" I think we're gonna win the division. This next question comes from Beef. He says, "Do you think the players that we got from New England from free agency has to do with the players really liking Flores and disliking Belichick, Brady leaving, or the disrespect of fans on the wildcard game? What is your opinion?" Has a lot to do with B-Flow. I think if you look at what literally all of them said was, yeah, we signed because of Brian Flores, and that's not a joke. I think the only one who didn't say that was, I can't remember. Maybe Jordan Howard didn't say it. I can't remember, but I know all the defenders said it. Like, yeah, one of the big reasons we, got here was because of Brian Flores, and we know how he treats players, and we know how much he cares about his players, and stuff like that. And because if you look at the offer, so the Raiders offered more money, and I know we have no state income tax here in Florida, but you look at what so that maybe has a factor in it. But the Raiders did offer more money, and he still came to Miami. I know people offered big contracts to Kyle Van Noy, still went to Miami. Ted Karras was offered more money in New England, still came to Miami. The only reason Devin McCourty isn't a Dolphin is because Jason McCourty his option was picked up, and the only reason Devin's going back to New England is because of Jason. Thanks, Jason. So yeah, Brian Flores is a huge reason why all of those free agents came here. So yeah, I don't know if that was even the question. Yeah, I do think it has to do with the players really liking Flores for sure. This next question comes with Listen Without Warning. He says, how many do we need to win to consider the moves we made at free agency a success? How many games do we need to win? I don't know. I don't know. I don't. I think those players have to play well, regardless of the win. So I would say it hinges on performance more than, I guess, results in terms of winning. Because if they all play really well, which should result in winning. So I don't know. I feel like it's more of individual success. Well, not individual success, but you know what I'm saying. I don't know how. I couldn't give you really a number. But I think we're going to get that division crown. So if we do that, then obviously it would be worth it. And I think we're going to have one of the better defenses in the league. So definitely top 15, for sure. Top 12, somewhere in there. If not top 10. It's a little crazy to say top 10, but I think we're going to be a good defense for sure. This next question comes from Tony. He says, what do you think of the plan? What do you think the plan is for round 1? Who knows? I really don't know. We'll have to wait and see. There's too many rumors. There's too many different opinions on that. We'll see what happens. This next question comes from Josh. He says, do you think the Dolphins should kick the tires on the Deshaun Watson trade? Give them 3 picks. They give us for Tunsil. Give us Tunsil back. He's only 24, same as Burrow, and proven stud in the league. Yeah, I mean, Deshaun Watson would be amazing. If you call the Texans and they want to give you Deshaun Watson, you do whatever it takes to get Deshaun Watson. This next question comes from SM. He says, why are the Dolphins always under the radar and given very little credit by the national media? If Dallas had 3 first-round picks, Skip Bayless would be talking about it nonstop. Or if any other team beat New England at home, it would have had major coverage. But the Finns are always treated like a joke, and people treat Stephen Ross like garbage. Jeff Ireland, Dennis Sickey, Mike Tannenbaum, and Adam Gase were all pretty terrible, but he allowed them the freedom to do their jobs without interference from the owner, then had the good sense to fire them. I really don't know, and I don't really care. The Cowboys had Tony Romo, they've had Dak Prescott, so they've had, star quarterbacks. So I think it has a little something to do with that, not to mention that they're the Cowboys. But I think we've won more playoff games than they have in the last 20 years, because we obviously won the game against the Colts in the early 2000s. I think it's more than they've won in the last 2 decades. I could be wrong about that. Yeah, they know that's true. We're tied with them. Either that or we gotta have a little bit more than us, because they did beat the Lions in the playoffs. So, so maybe that stat's wrong. But what was the question? Oh, I don't know. I guess I do know. We haven't had really any. Our best, I think you have to have great quarterbacks to get national attention, and we haven't really had that in a long time. So, I think that has a lot to do with it. And the whole thing you said about Stephen Ross is true. Stephen Ross has never interfered with anything that we've done. If that was the case, then Lamar Jackson would be our quarterback right now. So, because he really wanted Lamar, and obviously that didn't happen for the reasons that it didn't happen. So, Stephen Ross has never interfered with things like that. He's always let bad people make decisions, because obviously all of those guys do not have good resumes, and they were, they made the decisions that they made. So yeah, it wasn't his fault. So yeah, it's a bunch of baloney. If you win games, you win. And if Tua comes to Miami, if Joe Burrow comes to Miami, you can expect a different take on the Dolphins than you would have in these next few months. Because if those 2 players are added, I think there's gonna be real hype around this team, and especially if we get the 2 tackles, I might just explode, just apparate out of excitement. So it's gonna be pretty awesome, because of the possibilities. There's so many different things the Dolphins have so many picks, dude, and they've already added so much talent to the team. So it's gonna be awesome. It's gonna be fun to watch. I cannot wait for the draft. It's gonna be rad, and that is gonna be it, guys. I am Skagster83. That's gonna be it for this episode. Look forward to the Wine Bottle Dolphins team. It's gonna be fun. It's gonna take a while to get this list together, because there have been so many teams, and I'm gonna leave you with some of the criteria before one of the criteria that I think people are going to look at the list and think, well, why isn't this player on the list, is the team has to play in today's game. So it's basically taking a time machine and taking those players and playing now. So, players like Tony Nathan are going to get more consideration because of their skill set. And again, it's not a body of work. It's just a single season with the team. But you have to be with the team more than 1 year. So Joey Porter is not going to be on the team. If you guys, I'm not going to put Joey Porter on the team. He had one really good year with us. We're not putting Joey Porter on the Dolphins wine bottle team. So, but the strict criteria is that you have to play in today's game. So what that means, all of that stuff. It's going to be fun assembling an offense around Dan Marino, because there's a lot of possibilities. I don't want to spoil some of the receivers that I could put on the team. I'm not going to put Brandon Marshall on the team, so don't have to worry about that. But those players like Irving Fry, there's a couple sleeper hits in there. So I'm excited to do this team, and it's going to be a fun episode. It's going to come out sometime this week. Hopefully, I support it. I don't really care if it gets support, because it's just going to be fun to make, and it's going to be a nice little addition to the channel, and I'm excited about it. So I'm SHAREfactory, and I will see you guys in the one, I guess, all-time Dolphins team video. Hopefully you'll be there too. I'll see you guys in the next one.